Looking at my channel should instantly tell you two things. One, graphic design is obviously my passion, and two, I'm a big Dead Space fan. So with that said, it should come as no surprise that I got the Dead Space remake, and even though everyone and their mother is already making videos on the remake, I also wanted to give my thoughts. First things first, I think all of the clickbait prior to launch about how the remake would be awful, specifically because of Isaac and Nicole's models, was silly then and is going to look increasingly silly now that the remake is actually out and is amazing. If you are the type of person where the main character looking kinda like Adam Sandler ruins the game for you even though he's in a helmet the entire time, I honestly feel sorry for you. I'm not saying you have to love how he looks or think he looks amazing, I am saying you shouldn't let that little thing ruin the game for you. Same thing with how Nicole looks. Second, if you've never played a Dead Space game before, I think you should at some point play the original just to see what it was like, but I don't think there's anything wrong with jumping straight into the remake. If you have played Dead Space before and aren't sure if you want to play the same game you already played but with a new coat of paint, let me tell you the Dead Space remake is much more than that. It is a remake, not a remaster. There are new voice actors, including bringing Gunnar Wright to voice Isaac, who was silent in the original. There are new gameplay mechanics. For example, as a Dead Space 2 fanatic, I really like that they added kinesis impales to this game. Most importantly, the game follows the same beats as the original obviously, but some sections are reimagined. Whether they're laid out differently or more enemies spawn or the lights are off, it's different. Which, when I replayed Dead Space 2 on hardcore a few weeks ago and beat it in just over 5 hours with no deaths, probably the biggest factor behind that is that I've beaten Dead Space 2 so many times that I always know what's around the corner. And whatever scare factor there may be with that game is completely nullified because I already know what's coming. With this game, even though I've beaten the original many times, I don't know what's around the corner, and that makes playing this remake for me extremely tense. If you were someone who hated the turn the Dead Space 3 made into more of an action game instead of horror, this game I think strikes a great balance where the gameplay improvements are there, but this really does feel like a horror game. This is also aided obviously by the new graphics. This remake, some character models aside, looks fantastic. And I'm someone who generally doesn't care about graphics. When I boot up the Master Chief Collection and play Halo 2 for example, I always play with the old school 2004 graphics instead of the remastered graphics. In the case of the original Dead Space, I did replay it a couple months ago, and in all honesty, the game to me was starting to look dated, and I think for a horror game, making it look more realistic, where the necromorphs move fluidly and look real, and you see their limbs start to fall apart as you shoot them, and there's so much detail in the environment, and combined with the awesome sound, makes this game feel immersive and more scary as a result. As far as the story is concerned, I'm not going to spoil anything, and I'm going to be pretty vague here for people who have never played Dead Space, but one of my biggest problems with the original game is that the twist was easy to spot from a mile away. Granted, I did play Dead Space 2 first, so I did know what it was going in, but I don't think that matters. Even though I've seen The Sixth Sense a couple times and know the twist, I can still rewatch it and recognize, wow, that's a great twist. The original Dead Space, not so much. I don't see how anyone wouldn't see that coming. This game fixes that by adding new scenes and conversations, and I would love to see someone play this game blind who somehow hasn't had it spoiled, because I think this game now has a legitimate twist. This is a minor thing, but I also really like the new dialogue between Kendra, Hammond, and Isaac. Especially between Kendra and Hammond, because in the original they just argued the whole time, and this game I think handles it more realistically. And the addition of Isaac as a voice character makes the game feel more real, where instead of just being a guinea pig who gets told Isaac do this, Isaac do that, Isaac is making his own decisions and coming up with ideas as an engineer would. This was already covered in the marketing for this game, so I won't go too into it, but I also really like how the entire ship is connected. This comes into play as soon as the end of the first chapter, where rather than catching a train to medical like in the original, you walk there. And if you want, you could walk from medical after completing chapter 2 all the way back to the start of the game. It makes the ship feel like a ship rather than it being completely disconnected levels like a video game. This also benefits the horror aspect as it further fuels the feeling of nowhere is safe, rather than always ending each chapter the same way with a tram that essentially represents great job you did it. And don't get me wrong, I love the original Dead Space. I don't want to sound like I'm bashing it, but I think this remake makes a bunch of changes, and each one of them I understand why they did it, and I think they're all for the better. There's not a single thing where while playing this I thought, well, why did they change that? That's stupid. Actually, there is one thing. They switched the controls for stop and punch, and I keep getting the two mixed up. But besides that nitpick, I think all the changes are improvements. So if you are a Dead Space fan, I highly recommend getting this. I think it's a better version of the original game. Not just the same game with better graphics, but a true recreation of the original with new things added and things improved. If you've never played Dead Space before, I think this game would be a great jumping off point for getting into the series. I said a minute ago that to me the original game started to feel a bit dated, but Dead Space 2 does not feel or look dated at all, so play this and then play Dead Space 2. Whether or not you should play the third game, I'll leave for people to debate in the comments. But that's all for me. I'll catch you later.